welcome back to the channel, everybody. Hey, just thought I'd make a video, and this one might actually get a little bit long, so I'll be sure to put it chapters so you can hop through to whatever part might interest you the most. But thought I might make a video on some of the different operating systems and kind of eras within the hobby on some of our favorite equipment. And I figured one of the most common locomotives that people like, and certainly in my collection, one of the most common locomotives is the SD40 line, and in the variants, the SD40, SD40-2, SD40, tunnel motors, etc. And I figured I'd give sort of some operating characteristics. I see a lot of people on the forums that are interested in some of the different systems and options that are out there, whether it be on the secondhand market, which is where I buy most of my locomotives, or the brand new market, if that's your thing. And I do have some that I've purchased brand new as well. But I figured I'd go through these because these are all viable options that are out there on the open market, so everybody would have an idea on the operating systems, some of their shortcomings and strengths, as well as some of the differences in terms of how these look. Now, what I don't have represented in here, everything I run on my layout is command. So none of these locomotives are conventional only operation. What I will say is any locomotive that has a command capability, whether that be Lionel Legacy, Lionel TMCC, or MTH's DCS system, Protosound 2 and 3, those all run just fine in conventional mode. So if you just want to run a Christmas train around your tree with a conventional transformer, etc., these will all operate just fine. They'll operate beautifully, actually. But I just thought I'd go through and give some of the differences. What we have here, these two units right here, these are both Lionel units. This is a more modern Legacy SD40. This is a TMCC era with Odyssey speed control SD40 tunnel motor. This guy right here is an Atlas Master SD40. And then jumping back here, this is an Atlas Premier SD40-2. That's a Protosound 3 unit. And then this is an MTH SD40-2 with Protosound 3. And this is an MTH SD40-2 with Protosound 2 from the 5-volt era. So let's just hop over these guys real quick and kind of go through some of the differences. So the first unit I'll talk about, let's start off with Lionel. What I will say is in the TMCC era, you can find these with conventional control only, and on the boxes, it'll say with transformer controlled forward and reverse. It won't say command control or TMCC. TMCC is Lionel's Trainmaster Command Control. That's what it stands for. Now, that was updated, I want to say, in either 07 or 08 to the Legacy system, which is really an extension of TMCC. The boards have more memory, and thus they're able to provide more features. These guys can operate in 32 speed step mode, which would be your standard TMCC mode, or they can be operated in 100 or 200 speed step Legacy mode. And I'll tell you, in 200 speed step mode, this thing can creep, and it can really crawl at a very slow pace. The sound sets on these Legacy models are incredible. Modern Legacy stuff has different, you can select from different horns, different bells and bell pitches, stuff like that. They have quillable steam whistles on steam locomotives, quillable diesel horns on the diesel locomotives. I tell you, they sound and look great. There is nothing I can say bad about these in terms of their performance or the way they look. The one thing that I will say, they're pricey. They are not cheap. And as they come out with some newer models that have more advanced features and some new tooling, I'm really starting to see some of this Lionel product get up there in terms of the price point. This particular locomotive I bought from a local auction house here, literally just a few miles away from where my brother lives here in northeastern Ohio. And I don't really think I had anybody bidding against me on it, so I got this thing dirt cheap. I'm almost embarrassed to say what I bought it for. So this one gets a lot of mileage on my layout. It's the Southern Pacific Daylight paint scheme. This was a test paint scheme that they put on, I think, less than 10 SD40s and SD45s. It's commonly referred to as the popsicle paint scheme because, well, it looks sort of like a mid-80s push pop or something like that. But they did a wonderful job on this gorgeous locomotive. It has all the Southern Pacific unique lighting, safety lighting. The headlight operates as doubles as a Mars light because these don't have ditch lights on them. And then you also got that really unique Southern Pacific lighting on the back. Gorgeous locomotive. They pull for days. These have die-cast chassis. Very heavy. They are very heavy. In terms of scale proportions, it's just spot on. They did a wonderful, wonderful job. Drawbacks to these. When I bought this one, the conductor side handrail right here and my rear handrail, they were missing. And I didn't think much of it because you can go on MTH's website and buy, and Atlas's website and buy parts, individual parts like that, no problem. Guess what? With Lionel, not so much. Although there is no shortage of parts and support, if you want even the smallest piece of hand railing on this guy, you got to buy the entire shell. So I wasn't going to spend a couple $100s to replace a couple hand railings. So I fabricated my own hand railings, and they do just fine for me. But in terms of pulling power, this thing is right up there. In terms of sound set, probably the best sounding locomotive in my collection, along with the other legacy locomotives of this era. In terms of scale proportions, incredible. Lionel, like I said, does have some different road-specific details on each of their locos. A wonderful locomotive. Now, you will find these more modern Lionel legacy locomotives have what they call kinematic pilots. To kind of dispel or eliminate some of that ugly O-scale, high rail O-scale pilot swing and overhang around curves. Now this locomotive, it's got some weight behind it, so the rear one's not going to really move. But this locomotive does a great job with the kinematic pilots. I have an SD45 that has the kinematic pilots, and it's not so good. It's not adjust. I got to get in there and adjust it. It'll derail lighter cars behind it coming out of curves. So usually I run that one up at the front of a consist with a dummy or another powered unit behind it. It's just fine. But all in all, this is going to get very high marks. I'll put a little scorecard. It's all subjective at the end of this video for all of these, so you guys can kind of have my opinion. All right, let's move on to the next one. This is a TMCC era SD40 tunnel motor from Lionel. Now this one has Odyssey speed control. Can run in 32 speed step mode with Odyssey on or off. It can run in 100 speed step mode with Odyssey on or off. These two guys can be run together if you turn off cruise control and put them in TMCC 32 speed step mode. And I'll show that a little bit later in the video. If you try to run them together with Legacy or with Odyssey turned on, they will not sync up. They're gonna fight each other, and it'll be bad. In fact, I kind of tested it just to see if it was even possible to find a setting, and what ends up happening is this guy is gonna sense all that resistance, and it'll actually shut down the locomotive, and the cab light will start blinking, basically to tell you something's wrong. So don't ever run these with Odyssey turned on trying to lash them up. It will not work. At least I've never been able to make it work. This guy, very beautiful locomotive. In fact, detail-wise, it's on the same level as that Legacy locomotive is. Gorgeous detail. This one has pilots that are fixed to the truck, so they'll swing. Not the end of the world. I've learned to accept that in high rail O scale world. You're going to have swinging pilots. It just is what it is. If you run really high radiuses, if you're afforded that room, if you're running, you know, some of the Atlas track, or if you're running flex track and you have a 110 or 120 inch diameter capabilities, more power to you. We run 060 down here in the train room just because to maximize our layout, that's what we had to do. The one thing that I will say about this guy that I wish they would have done a little bit different is some of the proportions underneath the frame are not quite perfect. See that huge wheel gap right there between the pilot and the trailing end of the truck? That shouldn't be like that. If you look here on this Legacy, see how it's nice and snug up against it? That's what the prototype looks like. And you can also see, so this is an SD40, which in real life is substantially shorter than an SD40 or an SD45 tunnel motor, which rode on the chassis of the SD45P, which was the passenger variant of the SD45. But look at that fuel tank. You know, it's kind of covering, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Basically, it covers 6 of the stanchions on the hand railing. If we come down here to this guy, this one is only covering barely 5. So it's a longer locomotive in real life, but here on our little model, in our model world, our compressed model world, that fuel tank is actually shorter than this one. So you end up with these wheel gaps. That's really the only detrimental thing I can say about this model. Sound-wise, I feel like the sound files on these are almost as good as the Legacy sound files, just with less capability. There's less sound options, less goodies built in there. You know, I run all my stuff right now with a cab 1 and a TMCC controller, so I don't have full Legacy sound capability anyway, because I just won't spend $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 for a Legacy 990 system. I'm just holding out for the Lionel Base 3 if it ever comes out. But similar to the Legacy unit, this has a die-cast chassis. It's very heavy. It pulls like an absolute beast. Performance-wise, fantastic. You can usually find these for pretty good prices at shows. And I find that the TMCC electronics, it's pretty forgiving and it's pretty long lasting. So yeah, if you ever come across one of these tunnel motors, or if you come across a regular SD40 or SD40-2 or an SD38, they do have SD38s in Legacy, and the easy way to tell an SD38, the easiest way for me is always the SD40s are going to have 3 cooling fans up here, and SD38 will only have 2. It looks a little bit different in this area as well, where the air inlets are, where the dynamic brake grids, this whole area up here, and where the traction motor blower inlets are. Looks a little bit different here on a 38 as well, but quickest way to tell is a 40 will have 3 cooling fans, a 38 only has 2, and that's the same thing in a GP40 versus a GP38 as well. All right. Very high marks for this guy as well. I really like those engines. Moving down, this is another SD40. This is an Atlas Master SD40. And in terms of prototypical dimensions, the scale of it, and some of the road-specific options, this might be one of the coolest locomotives in my collection. And I say that because everything is just spot on in terms of the way it looks. Now, if you model Norfolk Southern, Norfolk Western, or the Southern, they do make these. One high praise I would give Atlas is they do come with so this piece, these are all 3 separate pieces. So the actual noses are interchangeable. They have high nose and high short hood variants, which obviously changes the cab as well. So you can get high short hood versions of the Norfolk Western, Southern, and Norfolk Southern options. Gorgeous locomotives. Now this is a TMCC, a Lionel TMCC equipped locomotive. So this can be run in standard 32 speed step TMCC. You can run this in 32 speed steps. This would not have cruise control turned on. This has Train America Studios, or TAS, EOB cruise control, which is engineer on board. So this can run in 32 speed step mode to be consistent with other TMCC equipped locomotives, whether that be a Lionel or another Atlas or even a Sunset third rail or a Weaver or K-line unit that has Lionel's licensed TMCC saw board in it. A saw board, saw stands for Sunset Atlas Weaver. Now, what I will say where this one kind of loses points is in the sound set. Because this is a licensed TMCC Rail Sounds generic saw board, it's got a very minimal sound set on it. It's got very basic diesel prime mover sounds, and it's literally the same sound set that's on any other model that's equipped with a TMCC saw board. So you've got it kind of sounds like, you'll hear it later, it sounds like a GP7 or a GP9. It doesn't really sound like an SD40 or an SD40-2 would, but to me, it gets the job done. The cruise control unit on this guy, so this can be run in 32 speed step mode. It can also be run in 128 speed step mode with the EOB cruise turned on. And with the 128 speed step mode turned on, it's a good performer. It does a really nice job. Does not hold its speed as well as a modern legacy unit or even the PS2 and 3 DCS, the Protosound units do, but it still does a pretty good job. Die-cast chassis, it's a very heavy engine. It pulls like crazy. In fact, all three of these engines individually pull very, very well. High marks for this one in terms of the detail on the road specific differences between locomotives. Paint quality, very high. The packaging, literally the packaging on this guy, far and away is the best packaging. The box is very sturdy. Now I will say, the big drawback on this, aside from the sound file, a lot of very delicate detail parts. If you look down at the side frames, you've got speed recorders and other very delicate parts down there. You have blowdown lines and stuff like that on the fuel tank around the pilots. This has the older version that would have been from like the 60s, that before they outlawed the pilot steps for the conductors and brakemen. Obviously the coupler cut bars and MU hoses, they're all very delicate. The steps on the ends of the long porches, they do function. Again, very delicate. So a lot of times these guys, when I pull one of these out to run them, I usually leave it on the layout for some time, because packaging them, putting them in, taking them out, yeah, there's a little bit of a pucker factor, because you don't want to break anything, because there's so many detail parts on these. But a wonderful locomotive nonetheless. All right, let's move to a slightly different Atlas unit. So this guy right here was one of the initial runs for Atlas in their Premier line. This is an SD40-2 Atlas Premier unit. This has MTH's Protosound 3 operating system. This would have been one of the initial, I think this was the second run of locomotives that Atlas had after they bought tooling from MTH once Mike Wolf retired. So for all intents and purposes, this is an MTH Protosound 3 MTH Premier unit, but it's just marketed as an Atlas Premier unit. I have found no differences whatsoever between the Atlas Premier PS3 units that I have, and I have four of them now. I have four of them. And the most recent releases from MTH before they sold off the tooling. It's literally made in the same factory. They have all the same electronics, same tooling, just some different paint schemes and whatnot. Now I saw this one, this is the Pan Am. Pan Am is no longer, the CSX gobbled up Pan Am. So I bought this because I think it's a great paint scheme, and I wanted this livery in my collection before Pan Am rode off into the sunset. Similarly, moving down, before I do that, One thing I will say, that although this is an Atlas model, it can't be run with this Atlas model, which is an Atlas Master. Similarly, I don't have any Atlas Trainman models on the layout right now, but if you have any Atlas Trainman, which is their, I would call it like their version of like Rail King or Lion Chief, but the Atlas Trainman stuff tends to be extremely detailed. It's as detailed as an MTH Premier, in my honest opinion. It's just typically that's for your conventional operation. You can get that with TMCC, but this guy, even though it's an Atlas, cannot be run in consist with that guy. Completely different operating systems. There is nothing similar about them. Different gearing, different speeds. Do not run these together. It's not possible. However, if I move down, this guy right here is an MTH Protosound 3. So it's an MTH Premier Protosound 3 SD40-2. Aside from the fact that I added a PTC antenna on this one, it's bone stock. And it'll run all day long with this Atlas model because they are the same exact operating system, same exact tooling. They are made in the same factory. It's just one's an MTH and this one is an Atlas because MTH sold all the tooling to Atlas for that model. So PS3, the nice thing about PS3, the Protosound 3 boards, is we all know, or I shouldn't say that. The whole reason I'm doing this video is for folks that are getting into the hobby and don't know the differences. Protosound 3 is nice because it did away with the need for a rechargeable battery, which on the older Protosound 1 and some of the very initial releases of Protosound 2, a failed battery could scramble the board and really mess things up and wreak havoc, which gets old because the replacement boards on these are very expensive, and for a while were almost impossible to come by. But fantastic operation, solid sound files. The Protosound 3 sound files can be changed, and actually they're interchangeable with the 3-volt Protosound 2 sound files. So if you like the way a certain locomotive sounds, you can literally reflash your locomotive just on your home computer with an MTH TIU or TIU and DCS controller, and you can actually change the sound files. If you wanted this thing to sound like a steam locomotive, you could do that. I don't know why you would, but you could. But more often, you know, if you want to change the sound of the prime mover or the horn, etc., you can do that. The Protosound 3 units all have LED lighting, so all of the headlights, ditch lights, cab lights, etc., those are all going to be LED. So they're a nice bright white. They don't pull as much electricity and as much draw off the track. I love Protosound 3. Very smooth operation. Once you get these guys broken in, you know, have a few hours of runtime and have everything lubricated, they run really smooth and really nice. This guy is an MTH Protosound 2 variant. This is of the 5-volt operating system. So some of you guys new to the hobby might hear, you know, oh my God, stay away from the 5-volt operating system. It's horrible, blah, blah, blah. So Protosound 2, the earliest releases, which I believe came out, I think the first release of Protosound 2 was 01 or 02. So it's been a while. They had a 5-volt board. The board going through the different circuits was typically on a 5-volt power level, versus the later PS2 had 3-volt boards, and it operated, I think, at 3.4 volts. So if you were to look at these internally, they look completely different on the inside. On the outside, not so much. So pretty much once these guys came out, you'll see the same level of detail versus on an MTH PS2 early 5-volt unit compared to a very late model PS3 unit. Now, what you'll see down here on the side frames, try to get it in focus. These are all die-cast side frames. What you will notice is here, there's no brake line detail. If I come back up here, you see how you have the brake lines coming off the air cylinders on these PS3 units? Those additional side frame details would have come to light when the 3-volt variants of these guys started to come out around 07. So if you get a PS2 unit that has 5-volt, is that a bad thing? Well, yes and no. So there was definitely a 2 or 3 year period where the main capacitors on these 5-volt boards had some issues. And I think those issues are more profound when you have your locomotives in storage that go through a lot of heat and humidity cycles. So if you store your locomotives that aren't being used in a non-air conditioned or non-heated space, an attic or a garage with a lot of humidity and temperature swings, you're probably begging for trouble. I always recommend to leave the little desiccant, you know, the dry packs that come inside the packaging of these things in the box with them to absorb any moisture and humidity, protect your equipment. Now, me personally, I've had great luck with these 5-volt boards. They're super easy to work on. And what I say is it's real easy to troubleshoot these if you do have an issue. The boards themselves don't come apart very easily. So if you do have a capacitor issue or the board itself runs into issues, they can be really, the boards themselves can be difficult to work on because the two pieces don't come apart real easy without doing damage. Any upgrades that you would want to make moving forward would be with either a PS2/3 stacker board, which essentially converts this to a PS3 unit and does away with the need for a battery. Or if you can find an existing PS2 board set, which those are like hen's teeth. They're not very common anymore. I don't know why you'd want to go back in with obsolete equipment, but one easy way to kind of spot these, and I'm going to kind of turn this guy over here to show you. So first off, the 5-volt Premier stuff is going to have 2 driven trucks up front with 1 pickup roller on each truck. Now the newer PS2 with the 3-volt and the PS3, you're going to have your blind truck, instead of being towards the back, will be in the middle, but all 6 wheels on something like an SD40 would be gear driven. So that's one quick way to spot a Protosound 2 unit. And I'm trying to get here. So what you see there, this is the dead giveaway. So on the left, that's a volume pot. But see that little circular charging jack? So when you see a round jack like that, that's the charging port for a 5-volt Protosound 2 board. So that's how you know this guy has a 5-volt Protosound 2 operating system. So that's for the MTH charger. So if you don't want to sit your engine on the track and let it charge on track voltage, which runs the chronometer and the clock on this board, you can just plug it into the charger. And I have 2 of those chargers. I have one at my place back in Columbus and one here at the layout. So that's one way. If you have to have these guys stored for any length of time, you'd want to charge it up before you run it. This one obviously has a BCR in it, so I don't worry too much about, about batteries anymore, because what I do when you have a BCR, basically you put this guy on the track, and once it sees, I think 12 volts, the charging circuit sends power to the BCR. The BCR basically acts like supercapacitors, and within 20 or 30 seconds, it's fully charged and you're good to go. So that's these guys. Now, other big difference, biggest drawback with this one, the sound set is not nearly as good as the later PS3 and 3-volt PS2 units. The sound set is not nearly as good as modern legacy, or honestly, I think even the TMCC stuff has a better sound set in terms of how it sounds. Now, these have a lot of sound files, and you can do a whole bunch of different, really unique sounds, cab chatter, freight sounds, clickety clack. You can do coupler close, coupler slack. It has built-in railway crossing, horn blast sequences, cool stuff. It's just different. It's just a little bit different. Different take on the same theme as what Lionel has. What are some of the drawbacks in terms of the actual model itself? All of these, similar to the Lionel unit that I mentioned to you, It's not as noticeable, but there's still a pretty good wheel, gap between that pilot and the trailing part of the truck. An SD40-2 in real life is a couple feet longer than an SD40, and all that extra length went into the overhangs or porches. And if you look at these, you can tell that versus an SD40, these porches are quite a bit larger. So that's accurate. But what they didn't quite do right is, again, see how if you look at the front leading edge of this cab, see how it kind of lines up with the center line of that center axle of the truck? Well, if I come over here and do the same thing, see how it's set back? If anything, this should be moved in front of this cab line, since the frame and chassis is actually longer in real life. And if we look at this fuel tank, that's covering about 5 total stanchions side to side, whereas again, this guy's covering essentially about 6 stanchions. So in real life, this is a shorter frame, shorter locomotive. This guy's longer, but that tank is actually scale sized in terms of its length. This one's very, very short. Again, I'm counting rivets. I'm just trying. I'm not necessarily banging on the design. I just trying to point out some of the things that aren't 100% accurate. Swinging pilots on these guys. Now, they are offered in 2-rail variants. So for folks that run their HO equipment on 2 rails, more scale-sized rail, you can fix the pilots, which looks really good. And I have a couple locomotives in my collection where I have fixed pilots on the front end with KD couplers to keep them looking scale. Obviously, I cannot run those in consist with the front end hooked up. They always have to be at the lead of a train. But I keep the back pilots swinging so that I can be a part of a consist. But these sound great. They operate great. You can mix a PS2 5-volt with a PS2 3-volt and a PS3 unit all in consist. They'll operate and perform flawlessly. I like the DCS system. The majority, I'd say probably 75, maybe 80% of my collection's MTH or now the Atlas Premier, but Protosound 2 and 3 in terms of its operation. I don't know, there's no right or wrong. It's really what you like. In terms of just, scale accuracy, I think the Atlas comes in first, even though this is a 20-year-old model. They were so far ahead of everybody else at that point in time. Certainly Legacy is if not on the same level, then just maybe a half step behind, but it's pretty much right there as well. Great performer, the TMCC with Odyssey. If you get something in that era, TMCC with Odyssey, you will not be disappointed by the performance. They look beautiful. I don't think anybody would be disappointed with one of these in their collection if you're thinking about it. In terms of value, that's great value. It's fantastic value. You can usually get those at a relatively affordable price by today's standards. I've seen them at shows for as cheap as $150. I bought a conventional version of one of these for $100 once. Now it's conventional, so I ended up detaching the powered trucks from the motors. Everything's still internally connected, but it's a very heavy dummy for me at this point because I'm considering maybe putting either a Legacy or an ERR board into it. It's too nice of a model not to have it be powered. These guys, big swings. Biggest detractor with this is the price point. I think it retails for $579. It's getting up there in price, brand new. Now on the secondhand market, typical Protosound 3 in good shape with, good mileage and time on it and not damaged with all the original packaging is still going to probably bring somewhere between $350 and $400, maybe more than that if it's a highly desirable low production run or custom run paint scheme or livery. You can find some good value with your PS2 stuff, especially the 5-volt. I wouldn't personally shy away from a 5-volt unit as long as I knew it was fully functional and could verify that. I've only had one PS2 5-volt board ever go bad on me. And to be honest, it still works. It's just, it overheats after about 15 minutes. There's a burned trace. I think a diode burned up and is letting too much power bleed through in the wrong direction, and it's burning a trace. So I don't run that one anymore. I'm going to try to fix that board if I ever get around to it. But I've never had a board go bad on me. I've never had a capacitor go bad on me. But I have friends that have, and I know it's frustrating because replacing these boards is it's not cheap. It's not difficult to replace a board. Replacing a board in these is very easy. It's not cheap to do. So if you ever do decide to buy a PS2 5-volt unit, I wouldn't say be afraid of it. I would just say verify that it operates and all functions and everything operate flawlessly before you commit to buying it. The only issues I've had with 5-volt boards since I've been in the hobby have come at the hands of unscrupulous sellers that have sold me something that's broken and passed it off as operational, and I've had no way to verify that. Rolled the dice, took a gamble, and ended up getting burned. And that's happened to me a couple times. Some people are just not good people. It is what it is. That's every aspect of life, right? But that's those in a nutshell. Hey, how about this? I got a nice, heavy, long train on the layout right now. Why don't we get these guys all pulling the train to see what kind of pulling power they all have? And I think you'll be surprised at what the capabilities of these are. Alrighty, guys. So the first unit we'll be firing up here, guys, is the Legacy unit. I'm just going to use the Lionel TMCC Cab 1 to operate this. I'm going to be firing this up and running it in 200 speed step mode, which to do so, you just hit the momentum button to H, which puts it in 200, M puts it in 100, L would put it in 32 speed step mode. I have Odyssey turned on. Why don't we fire this guy up and see how she performs.
Dispatcher, we're ready. Is it okay to pull? Over. Negative. Please hold. Over. Acknowledged. Waiting on a clear signal. Out. Tower, looking for a clear. Can we move yet? Over. Roger that. Take the green. Over. Copy that. We have a clear signal. Out.
So the next unit we'll run is the TMCC with Odyssey. Just as a case in point, I'm also running these at 20 volts to the rails with the Z4000. So the Legacy locomotive that just pulled never surpassed 2.2 amp draw. We're going to see a much higher draw with this SD40 tunnel motor. But that being said, let's go ahead and fire her up. You can hear a little bit different in the sound set. So right here is the highest resistance as it comes through the curve, and I saw this one peak at 4.4 amp draw just for a split second, but it's pretty much in the 3. So the TMCC is definitely going to pull more amperage than the Legacy, but not having any problem pulling this train by itself. This is a heavy train, guys. Those well stacks are die cast. The auto racks are very heavy. I pulled this train myself by hand, and I was shocked at how much resistance it has. So these are performing great. Alrighty, guys. Now we're gonna get into the Atlas product. What I'll do is I'll run the Atlas Master SD40, and then we'll follow that up with the Atlas Premier PS3 unit. Gonna see some very different operation sets. Now, what I will say is I have this one set up in 128 speed step mode. The tunnel motor that just ran was set up in 100 speed step mode with high momentum, and the Legacy unit was set up in 200 speed step mode for its smoothest operation. This is going to be in 128 speed step mode, which is cruise control defaults to on. What I will say is where you'll get some differing opinions on these guys with the EOB cruise control activated in 128 speed step mode. It essentially defaults to a high momentum, and you cannot change that. So using the cab 1, which just has a thumb wheel to control speed and no detents, you don't really know where you are at. You got to get used to these guys, because if you give it a huge blast of speed right off the gate, it's going to take off kind of slow, and then it's going to really speed up. So, you know, you do have to kind of work the throttle a little bit to get it to the speed that you want. Now, although this probably is every bit as heavy as the Legacy, this train is very heavy. We're going to see a lot more of a higher current draw with this guy. I'll be interested to see if it stalls out. It might stall. Even though it should be able to pull as much, I do feel like the Legacy operating system, even the TMCC operating system, is way better than this one. But you know, I guess let's see, right? Let's check it out. We'll find out. Here we go. So it's getting into the toughest part of its pull right about now. And I'm watching the amps. It spiked at 4.4, just like the TMCC unit did. But there she goes. Got through the hardest pull, so it's doing just fine. Doing just fine. Again, can't re-emphasize how heavy this train is, guys. These three locomotives done a great job pulling a train this size. This is about a 3%, 2.5 to 3% average grade with an 060 half curve. That's a pretty hard job for one locomotive to pull off. All three have done a great job. Now that it's at the top of the hill, the locomotive just crested the top of the hill, and it's working pretty hard. It spiked at 4 volts up there. Usually the Lionel units are starting to lessen their voltage draw. But I'm gonna shut this one down and let's get some of the Protoson 3 units on the board, on the tracks. Well, okay guys, I got this PS2 unit on the track to see how it would do. And to be fair, I didn't think this was gonna be able to pull this train. These have stamped steel frames and chassis, and they just do not even come close to the weight of the first 3 locomotives that were on here. With that train that's on the track right now, I would never try to run a train of this weight with just one MTH or even in one of these newer Atlas Premier engines. They're just not heavy enough. And I did hook it up and was going to pull it down the grade to get everything set up. And I hooked it up, pulled it about maybe 18 inches, and it threw 3 of the 4 traction tires blew off. So these guys just aren't heavy enough, guys. I pulled this around so you could hear the sound set on it. The 2 traction tires on the other side of the locomotive, when I took the weight off, they seemed to reseat themselves just fine. This one's completely off, this middle driver right here. So I'm going to give you guys the sound set on this real quick, and then I'm going to pull this one off the track, and I'm just going to go ahead and put the 2 PS3 units on there. I'll run them in consist, and we'll see what kind of amp draw they have. The amperage draw shouldn't be high. I'd say it probably won't exceed 2.5 or 2.6 amps. Now, part of that amperage draw is some of the crossing signals, and I have an EOT on here too. So all of the amps aren't being pulled by the locomotives themselves, but obviously the draw for the motors is the highest pull. But we're not going to run this guy until I can get this traction tire reseated on here. But this is what the sound set on this guy's like. I just got my DCS controller here, so we'll start her up, show you kind of what she has to offer here. Here's a startup sequence. Horn, bell, coupler fire, coupler slack. Oh, didn't do it. But that's those guys. I'm gonna go ahead and shut this one down, and we'll get the other 2 on the track together. Again, I'm not even gonna try to pull the train with just one of these MTH or Atlas Pro Sound 3 units, because I don't want to spend my afternoon replacing traction tires. So let's shut this guy down real quick, and we'll get the other 2 on the track, and we'll just put them into a consist and pull the train with both of them. Alrighty guys, I'm gonna make this quick because my camera is getting low on battery power. So what I will preface this, when I fired these up just now, the Illinois Central unit must have picked up a little bit of metallic dust or debris on the speaker, so it's a little crackly. I'll drop the fuel tank and clean the speaker up a little later today, but it might come through in the camera, it might not. But let's go ahead and get these guys started up and see how they pull together as a pair. So these guys are coming into that tricky spot, and I'm watching the amp draw, and it's hovering in the mid 3-ish range right now. Let's see if it hits 4 with 2 locomotives. There it goes. It hit about 4.2, which usually when they are about to cross onto the bridge, that's where I see the current spike. So just heard them throttle up there. Another nice little feature of PS2 and 3 is that prime mover kind of moves around on its own sometimes, which is cool. But with a couple of them working together, they do a nice job compared to just one of the heavier Atlas or Lionel units. All right. Alrighty guys, one final quick running video I'm going to make here is I've taken the two most dissimilar but compatible models and just kind of want to prove that they work together. So I've got my very modern legacy locomotive paired with my oldest Atlas Master locomotive. Both of these, remember, have a 32 speed step capability. I've disabled speed control on this and I've set it to 32 speed step mode with low momentum. And on the legacy model, I've turned Odyssey off and I've put it into TMCC mode by selecting the L on the momentum setting. And then I've created a train with both of these. Now, it's important. This is actually the lead unit, even though it's trailing. I'm technically running these in reverse. The TMCC model has to be the lead unit for everything to sync up correctly. So your legacy unit has to be either in the middle or at the tail locomotive. Now, again, this is leading the train, but I'm technically running these in reverse. Hope that makes sense to everybody. And I'll make a video on this at some point showing how I set all these up. The tunnel motor, the Union Pacific Lionel TMCC locomotive that I ran, unfortunately, would not be compatible with these guys because it is an early run with Odyssey and does not have an Odyssey on-off switch. So I cannot turn Odyssey off, and in doing so, it can only be run with other Odyssey-equipped locomotives, which is unfortunate. But let's run these real quick and show you that they do work. Now, I'm going to have to work the throttle a little bit more because they don't have speed control turned on. So I have them set as train 1, and we're just going to go ahead and start them up. They move very nicely together. There's no bucking. They're on the same speed steps. Now coming up the grade, I'm gonna have to give it a little bit more juice to keep it consistent. And I'll flip the camera over here so you can see them coming up the grade. So I'm actively working this throttle, guys, to keep them at a relatively constant speed. Because as the train gets heavier on the grade, it wants to slow down without speed control. So just bumping the throttle up as it reaches this higher point. Now as I look over with two locomotives, it's just getting into the 4 amp draw range. And I'm just having to give it more and more throttle as the train gets heavier. And you can see I can't control the speed as accurately as the computer can. But as it starts to get through that bend, it's speeding up. It's pulling 4 amps going up that hill. Now, as it crests the grade, it's going to want to speed up as it comes back down. So I'll have to back down on the throttle a little bit. And you'll hear the prime movers. So it's definitely starting to speed up. I'll show you, it's going to want to take off when it starts to go down the grade here as it gets less and less resistance. So we're going to back off on the throttle, keep them from going airborne around the bend here. That's the steepest part of the layout that they're coming out of right now. So now they got quite a bit of train pushing them. So we'll slow them down and stop them right here. But for anybody that's ever wondered, whoop, I stopped it a little too quick. For anybody that's ever wondered, that is obviously a modern legacy with 200 speed step capability running with an Atlas Master with a TAS speed control system. But there you have it, guys. Just thought I'd show you that that's possible. You just got to set them up right to make it work. Alrighty. So just wrapping everything up, guys. All very, very awesome models. Just a little bit different take from each manufacturer on these SD40s that you could add to your collection. Or stay away from based on what's important to you. But hey, I promised you guys a little bit of a scorecard on each of these, and this is obviously very subjective. What I'm going to look at is just about 7 categories, and we'll just put a score to it. These are all my opinion. You can score them however you might want, but this is just my assessment. So moving forward, if you're looking to add something, you could take this for whatever it might be worth. I'm just going to look at the overall price of these units, and then I'm going to look at the value you get for the money you'll have to spend on one of these guys. I'll look at the exterior accuracy, and we'll also judge the electronics, the operating system itself, as well as the features that it gives you. Then I'm going to look at the durability, the long-term durability, the reputation of the different product lines, and finally, the actual operation of the units themselves, which you did see in the videos, but you can't really glean a whole lot long-term from these guys. So let's put scores to each of these and see where they shake out. So the first unit, guys, is the Lionel Legacy SD40E. And the way I ranked that, I put it on a scale of 1 to 10. I put the price at a 6. Now, the only reason I put a price out of 6 and not higher is these are really pricey models when they're brand new. You can find them on the secondhand market. They still tend to be pretty pricey on the secondhand market. Now, I got an absolute great deal on mine, on this particular SD40, but I don't think that's the norm. I just snuffed out a really good deal. So rank that out 6 out of 10. Value, 7 out of 10. It gives you a whole ton of stuff. It's a beautiful model, but you got to weigh that against what you're going to have to spend to get one of these into your collection. So I rank that a 7. Appearance-wise, a solid 9, and frankly, if I put a 10 on this, I wouldn't be making a stretch. This is a beautiful model and highly accurate. Lionel really does their homework when it comes to the looks on these things. The Legacy operating system, you could make it an hours-long video for days on the different things you can do with Legacy. If you have the full suite of a Legacy electronics on your railroad, you can do all kinds of really cool automation, automated routes. You can have, there's sensors on the bottom of these locomotives that can do certain features when they cross over a sensor track. It's a fantastic system. I rank that 9 out of 10. The operational features, and again, if you have a Legacy 990 or eventually the Base 3 system, the features and the operations and what you can do with this, I really think it's kind of second to none. It comes at a price. It comes at a very steep price. But if you like to automate and have all kinds of different things going on, a fantastic system. The performance of these locomotives is second to none. They can pull a massive train by themselves. You saw on my layout with all the grade work, had no issues on a flat layout. You can even pull longer trains or add locomotives, whatever you want to do, but these things pull for days. Durability, I think these are well-built locomotives now. I do give them a couple points for back of 10 for a couple reasons. They are a little bit delicate, and although parts are readily available, you have to buy, sometimes, you can't just get the smallish detail part that you need without buying something bigger. I will say that in the last couple years, Lionel's quality control has suffered, and so I knocked him a point for that, because there has been some, fresh out of the box locomotives that have been damaged, which is disappointing. But overall score, 59 out of 70, and of the 6 locomotives, that ranks number 1. All right, let's go to the number 2 unit. So next on the list, guys, I have the MTH Premier SD40-2 with Protosound 3.0. Fantastic model. I gave this a rating of 7 out of 10 on price. These cannot be bought brand new unless you should happen to come across a new old stock in a train store somewhere, which is unlikely at this point. So these are all going to be purchased on the secondhand market. They still bring quite a pretty price for a pre-owned locomotive, and I think that's due in part because the newer Atlas models are higher priced. Value-wise, I gave it a 7 out of 10. It's a very nice model. It operates great looking, can pull pretty well. 7 out of 10 on value. Appearance wise, they're beautiful. These are beautiful, not exactly scale proportionate, like I mentioned in the little overview, but still look very nice. And unless you're really a rivet counter, you're going to think these things are beautiful. System wise, I love Protosound 3. I love the DCS system. Protosound 3, again, there are some shortcomings in terms of some of the electronics themselves going bad. I personally have had good luck with Protosound 3 units. I've never had one fail me. So I gave the DCS system and Protosound 3 in general an 8. Operations and features, there's tons of different individual sound files. You can do all kinds of real cool stuff. Doppler shift. It has preloaded horn sequences for crossings, grade crossings, forward operation, reverse operation, flashing ditch lights. You can go in and fine tune some of these specs, strobe lights. Another operational characteristic of these units that I didn't really get into because I do not run smoke. MTH units smoke like crazy. They are fantastic smokers, and the smoke units themselves are very durable and relatively easy to work on, you know, when you need to change the wicks out. Lionel smoke units, I've found they kind of burn out kind of easy, and when they do, you've got to replace the whole kind of board element on top of the smoke unit itself. Performance, aside from the fact that they're not as heavy and thus can't pull as long of a train, performance-wise, they run extremely smooth. You will not be disappointed. Consist 2 or 3 of these together for a longer train, they sound great. It's really a nice operation. And consisting with the DCS system is very easy to do. Durability-wise, these are relatively easy to work on. They're very easy to troubleshoot. They're very easy to take apart. They're very easy to lubricate. In terms of maintaining your collection, if you're operating them, far and away the easiest of this bunch in this review. So overall, this one gets a score of 56 out of 70, which puts it in the number 2 slot of the 6 units tested. So in the number 3 spot, I have the Atlas Premier SD40-2 with Protosound 3.0. For all intents and purposes, this is exactly the same as the MTH unit. It's just this is the newer variant. And as such, it costs more. There's less of these on the secondhand market, very few of them on the secondhand market at this point in time. So you're going to have to spend more money for these guys, which obviously you're getting the same exact unit as you would if you bought a MTH Protosound 3 unit of the same build, and therefore your value is lower. Now, that being said, if it's a livery or paint scheme you just got to have, or if it's a road number that you operate, well then obviously this is going to be a great option for you. So number 3 out of the 6, the Atlas Premier SD40-2, but frankly, aside from price, it's interchangeable with the MTH unit. All right, next up would be the TMCC with Odyssey equipped Lionel SD40 tunnel motor. Price-wise, you can find yourself some great deals on these. I gave it a 9. Now, that being said, you can very easily spend way too much on one of these. So make sure that if you do decide to go this route on the secondhand market, you're buying something that's 15, 20 years old, that you get it for a good price. Don't spend too much. But because the price points on these can be so attractive, the value is going to be very, very high. Appearance-wise, now specifically to this SD40 tunnel motor, I did point out some of the exterior flaws in terms of the scaling and whatnot. But now I also have a couple of GP30s that are TMCC and Odyssey equipped, and there are dead ringers for the legacy, their legacy sisters. So this particular model, because of some of the drawbacks, I gave it a 7. System-wise, there are some limitations with TMCC, even if it's equipped with Odyssey. Like I mentioned in the video, this one doesn't have the Odyssey on-off switch. And though you can turn off Odyssey with some different keystrokes on the control unit, I don't recommend that. When you do that, if you turn off Odyssey in that fashion, the lights in the smoke unit will actually see track voltage, which you run the risk of burning that stuff out. It's just not worth taking that risk. So later models that have the on-off switch are going to be more desirable than one like my tunnel motor here that does not have it. Performance-wise, performs great. Now, some of these earlier Odyssey-equipped TMCC locomotives, especially in 32 speed step operation, they have a little bit of cruise control lurch. Especially I noticed that coming down grade with a light train without a lot of weight behind it. It's less obvious the more weight it has behind it. But some people, that bugs some folks. If you want silky smooth operation, this is going to be, of all of the units, the one that gives you the least smooth operation under certain grades and with less weight behind it or being pulled. Durability wise, these are very durable. It's a relatively simple system. There is a radio receiving antenna in these. You have to be careful when you take the shell off that you don't, if the antenna is sometimes mounted to the shell, that you don't yank that right out of the board. But otherwise, these are pretty durable, pretty husky. Not the most fun to work on, but not terrible either. But overall, a score of 52 out of 70, which puts it in the number 4 position. All right, next up is our MTH Premier SD40-2 with Protosound 2.0. This would be the 5-volt variant. Price-wise, you should be able to find these for a pretty good price. And similar to the TMCC units, a Protosound 2 5-volt operating system, I would not spend premium money, even if this has low miles, low time on it. It's just a little bit more of a rudimentary, crude version of Protosound 2.0 in command. So make sure that if you do buy one of these, that you're getting it for a solid price. You're not paying too much, which again, the lower the price, the more value you get out of it. Appearance-wise, these are gonna typically lack some of the detail of the later PS3 models and some of the later Protosound 2 with the 3-volt board in terms of the fine details, but they still look really nice. Look for paint flaws with these. Some of these have paint issues. If you see the paint starting to flake off, that has adhesion problems, it's never going to fix itself. It's just going to continue to get worse. So unless you want something that looks pretty beat down, avoid anything where you see paint flaking off. The system itself, Protosound 2 is a great system. The 5-volt boards do have their limitations. They do have their physical issues. Now, the latter, if this was a 3-volt unit, I would rate this higher. I would rate it, I would give it another point. This would slot somewhere between, a 3-volt system would slot somewhere between this 5-volt PS2 and a full-on PS3. Performance-wise, it's gonna consist plenty brilliantly with a PS3 unit or a PS2 3-volt unit. What I will say from a performance aspect, some of the sound sets not quite as good, and reflashing sound sets on the 5-volt stuff, it just seems like there's not as much support from MTH on that. So you might have trouble finding sound files to reflash. Durability, I gave it a 7. That's probably coming more from my personal experience. I've had great luck with these, but a lot of people ran into issues with them. And, there's a lot of 5-volt era PS2 units out there in the secondhand market now that have PS3/2 stacker boards in them. So they've basically been converted to PS3. MTH sells a PS3 upgrade board for these guys. So if you do have one that loses the main capacitors on the board or fries the board in any other fashion, you can get the upgrade boards. And I won't go so far as to say they're plug and play. There's a little bit of work involved. You got to use the soundboard from your existing 5-volt board. You got to get them apart without breaking them. So there's, it's a little tricky. I'm not so sure that it's probably beyond the scope of the average person. But if you're good with electronics and you're patient, it's something that you can do. But overall scored a 50 out of 70, which put it in the number 5 spot. And in this group, bringing up the number 6 spot, which this kind of hurts my heart a little bit because I actually love this locomotive and I love this entire series of locomotives, is the Atlas Master SD40 with TMCC and the TAS EOB cruise control system. Price-wise, strangely, because this whole series of units from Atlas is in very short supply on the secondhand market. Some of these can bring crazy money. I put a price of 8 on there. If you snoop around and if you're patient, you should be able to get these for a pretty good price. They were very expensive when they were brand new. I would say on the secondhand market, for one that's in very good shape, you should be able to find one of these anywhere with EOB cruise control. The earlier models, like pre-2004, will not have cruise control. So they'll be just a straight up TMCC operating system with no speed control. But with cruise control, with the EOB cruise control, you should be able to find these anywhere from $250 to $400 on the secondhand market. Again, making sure the fine detail parts are all there and not broken. Value-wise, I put it at a 6. And the reason for that is there are some limitations with this system. So, obviously, the cheaper you can get one of these, the lower you can pay, the better the value. But they are limited. There's not a lot of these in the market. So if you like this operating system and you like the way they look, and they are beautiful, every last one of them, there's several different models that they've released. This one just obviously just being the SD40s that we're reviewing. They are absolutely gorgeous, and it doesn't matter which one you get. The Atlas models they're truly models. System-wise, this is the TMCC SAW or basic TMCC licensed system with Train America Studios EOB cruise control. I personally like the cruise control, but that being said, it won't hold its speed as well as any of the other locomotives in this test. Even the TMCC Odyssey system, first generation Odyssey system, is going to have better speed control than the EOB system. That being said, it still does a nice enough job, especially when you have it in 128 speed step mode. Performance-wise, that kind of goes hand in hand. It can pull a ton of freight cars, heavy freight cars. These are very strong locomotives. If you pair 2 of them together, you can pull as long a train as you care to put behind it. Durability-wise, I ranked it kind of low. You have got to be careful putting these in and taking them out of the packaging. Now, Atlas does package these very nicely, and there's a reason for that. It's because they're so delicate. So you have to get really good at getting this stuff out of real snug packaging without breaking very, very delicate details. Like I said, a lot of people, once they get these out of the box the first time, they never put them back in. They'll put them on a display shelf somewhere, or put them in a cabinet to protect them, or just leave them on their layout. There's a lot of very delicate detail parts. But if you're careful with it, these are absolutely gorgeous models from top to bottom, regardless of what locomotive you would choose from this series. But okay, guys. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this video. It got awfully long. I know it got awfully long. But just thought that I would go through all these, especially for those of you out there that are new to the hobby, trying to get stuff figured out, or if you've been in the hobby and maybe have only been collecting one manufacturer and kind of want to know, hey, what's the deal with some of this stuff out there as prices rise? I love to hunt for good deals on the secondhand market. So yeah, so when you see something that's out there, maybe you can, refer back to this video and make a good decision, or maybe it'll help you make a good decision on whether you should pull the trigger on a locomotive that you might see at a show or on one of the retailer sites, Facebook Marketplace, etc., etc., etc. But hey, I'm going to sign off. I really appreciate everybody sticking with us. If you're still here at the end of this video, or even if you've hopped around, I appreciate you spending some time on the channel. Hope everybody's having a great week, and I hope that your day's been fantastic so far. Hey, happy railroading, everybody, and thanks for visiting us here at the Lake Erie and Midwestern. Take care.